Webster. The appointment we've had since I've been there 25, 30 years. But some of them things you can't let them get you down. You got to keep on going. And you get support from people, makes you feel good. You know, and when they call you on the phone at home and say that don't get down the dumps and don't give up and don't quit. So a lot of people stand behind you.
So have you ever felt like quitting?
Well, sure. When you get tired and what have you, and your grass needs mowed at home, you know, and the wife's flower beds aren't cleaned out, and you're kind of neglecting her. And when you got one of the best wives in the whole world, bar none, you know, you got to kind of keep that part up too.
So what other disappointments?
Well, I don't know.
Okay, we're talking with Jack O'Neill, volunteer with Central Kansas Flywheels Yesteryear Museum. And Jack, let me just ask again, what have been some of the greatest disappointments that you've had as a volunteer or as a president or board member with Flywheels?
I suppose one would be the lack of volunteers. You know, you've got two facets in the Yesteryear Museum. You got the museum part of it, and then you got the part of it of the people that belong to the club, Central Kansas Flywheels, and have gasoline engines and tractors and machinery and things like that. So not everybody's interested in the antique tractor part of it, and a lot of them are not interested in the museum part. They're interested in the show and visiting and with friends. So it's kind of hard to keep a good board of directors that's really 100% for the museum, that they want to have a dinner and a show and a social thing. And so you can't get by without either one, really. You've got to have both if you're going to have the club and have people belong to it. And so I guess, you know, the membership over the years has been from 100 to 200 and some, depends on the year and the activity and how much effort was put into the recruiting of them. It's kind of hard to raise money, and so I don't think that's a hardship. It's just something that you got to do that's not as pleasant as driving an old antique tractor around.
Are there any other disappointments?
Well, I suppose not with me. Probably some people have got more disappointments than I have, that's for sure. You know, I like work, and so I don't have any problem going out there and painting or digging a ditch or whatever needs to be done. I thought things were going pretty good. We were digging the foundation for the schoolhouse, and Teddy Hoos had just passed away. Him and I dug it by hand, and we got chewed out a little. We should add a backhoe to it. Why would we waste our time doing that and what have you? But I guess you just kind of grin about that and think, well, that's one of them things I did.
How do you motivate volunteers?
Well, try to get them interested in something that they like. you know, and all likes are different, of course, but some people like to help out at the sawmill. And you got a blade running and you can see a slab of wood, so you're accomplishing something right there as each board goes past. Nobody likes to paint very much and too well, and you know, that's a pretty good job that you have to get certain people to help do. A lot of people don't want to tackle to rebuild a piece of equipment, and so that's kind of limited, and we've been limited on space in order to do that too. That's been one big drawback, and the Hoff building was going to be great for that. Give us space, and you could put a piece of equipment in and work on it and leave it set a while, you know, between stages.
You mentioned earlier, Jack, about Yesteryear Museum, and we've talked about Central Kansas Flywheels. So can you discuss why there's these two different entities and how they work together or are different?
Well, the people that got together to plan the club in the start, Chet Anderson and them, came up with the name Central Kansas Flywheels. That they incorporated it, of course, a couple of years later. And so, what is the Central Kansas Flywheels? What's a flywheel? And so, you know, it has something to do with pertinent about any piece of equipment that runs. From the biggest steam engine we got's got a flywheel to a little sewing machine that the women sew with has got a little flywheel on them. So that's where the name came from. If you looked at clubs all over the United States, most of them that were organized years ago had flywheels in them. You know, there's still one in Florida and up in Minnesota and them I see advertised all the time. So the name not being as popular, and the Yesteryear Museum describes more what we have, and you know, it mostly agriculture machinery from around this part of the country that they use that we have, so yesteryear fits in pretty good. So we're using that for advertising now and still keeping the Central Kansas Flywheels incorporated. Some of the younger people use yesteryear all the time in their speaking, and I have problems with that, not because I don't want to, I just have been used to calling the Central Kansas Flywheels, but I understand that the yesteryear is the best way to advertise it. And because what we got to, one of our biggest goals probably is to get as many people out there to visit as you can, because that's what's going to keep us going. So in our advertising and in our promotions, we got to have something that is going to attract people's attention to want to stop. And the Central Kansas Flywheels is hard to publicize that and get it going to where people understand it.
What kind of budget does the organization have?
Well, we have one hired employee, and then the utilities and stuff run us around $45,000 a year right now, and that's bare minimum. And a lot of the work is donated, and some of the material is donated. So the $45,000 is a figure that really don't tell the whole story. And you know, you put up a building, a new building 100 by 200 is going to cost you $300,000 to $350,000, and so somebody puts up this much and somebody puts up that, and it's in the budget, but it's not figured in the yearly or daily operation. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
And where does the income come from?
Well, from shows. And you know, we had an auction here a couple of years ago of some surplus equipment that we had, and that went in. We put together an advertising book that we sell advertising in. We used to call it our show book and our tractor pull book. And so we have good support of people coming around. We go to the home show and the farm show with a booth. And over the years, we've sold chances on a little lawnmower, riding lawnmower or pedal tractor, and used that for money raising. And donations.
Who have been some of the most significant volunteers?
Charlie Swedenberg. Charlie run Sunday stores around Salina for years, and come out there to work on a door one time before a show, and he never left. He just was out there every day, hot or cold or indifferent. He built displays upstairs. He donated a lot of things himself. Anything that he thought ought to be put in that museum, Charlie would spend his own money and bought it. Verl Troll was a farmer that lived up north a little ways. Him and Charlie worked there together. And the first people that started out, Chet Anderson and Dale Hoover and Gene Lundgren and Clayton Anderson, and they're the ones that put in a lot of work to get them DC generators down at Wichita and really get it started. And Ori Billenwellen. And I couldn't believe, here sat that steam engine and those DC generators and stuff, and he's building forms there on the floor to mount that equipment on. He had a snapshot in his pocket. And guess what? They poured them forms up about 1.5 or 2 foot high and slanted the sides of them, put rebar and stuff in them to hold them big machinery, and when it got done, it just fit perfect. And so, some good people. And, you know, you might have 200 members, and you might have 5 people out there working in the museum, and day after day, you know. And it was a wheat field, so of course mud was a big problem when we first got started. It's low, flat ground out there. So a lot of bricks and the old ice plants and the warehouse down here on 5th Street that was tore down was hauled out there, and a lot of that was crushed through old rock crushers by hand. And there's just been a lot of good people and work, but significant, the one you think back on, is Bob and Betty Marietta. They've been out there from day one when it got us started. And Chet Anderson, he was out there a lot.
What would you like to see happen?
Oh, I'd like to see it to put up the farmstead. We got a limestone house out there that needs to be put up, but have a farmstead and animals, and make it like a living history farm, kind of like they have up at Des Moines. Not quite the same, but, and have demonstrations so that every morning when you opened it up, people come in their costumes, and somebody, school teacher was in the schoolhouse, and somebody's in the woodworking shop. And so when people visited, there'd actually be, what I want to say, people in those positions in the church, you know, and to talk and answer questions. And an activity one that's going all the time.
That's a pretty big vision, Jack.
Pretty big vision. It won't happen in my lifetime. I've told people, you know, if I had 10 guys and we worked 5 days a week for 100 years, we'd still have work to do. So you got to look, you can't be discouraged on what little bit you do. You got to look at little accomplishments that's got to make you happy.
What could the city of Salina do to support the museum?
The city of Salina should give us part of their a yearly donation off of their motel tax. That, you know, they charge motels for tourism. And the county could too. Just like the Smoky Hill Museum, they get big bucks and quite a few paid volunteers. So we could have more support. We have good support out of the chamber. They help us out. If we have a big group, they will make favors for them. They direct bus tours and stuff to us out there. And we just need more than that, more of that.
What do you think Yesteryear will look like 10 years from now?
Well, I hope that it would be that you would come in and pay your dues to get in and pick up a little electronic contraption and go buy a piece of equipment and push a button, and it would play you a little history of that tractor, that thrash machine, or that demonstration, and have a woodwork shop going with the old tools in it that you could really make a table or something, or chairs. And we have a sawmill, you know, that came from Delphus, Kansas, and it's 100 years old and still saws wood. And we have another sawmill out there that we haven't put up yet. One's got a 48-inch blade and one's got a 52-inch blade. And just make it active and living. And
Jack, you retired in 1955 and you spent 20 more years of your life working out there. What drives you to do this?
well, I'd rather work out there than play golf, and I do have a set of golf clubs. I don't know what drives me. I guess, you know, when I went to high school, you know, to weld in a forge takes something. To weld two pieces of metal together in a forge so that you heat them hot enough to melt together. And when I went to high school, you had to learn to weld in the forge and make 3 lengths of chain before you could use the acetylene torch. So, and you know, I've seen Uncle Jim sharpen plowshares out on the farm himself, you know. And that was hard work by hand. Of course, when you took it to the blacksmith shop, they used a trip hammer on it to pound the edge out to make it sharp, and he did it by hand. So one time I seen him pull the disc out to go over the disc. And you know, it was just a little old 12-foot disc. They didn't have big machinery then. And it needed new bearings. So what's he do? He goes over to the hedge and cuts him a pole out of that hedge and comes over and uses a draw knife and a wood brace and bit and bored holes in it and made bearings for that disc. I know he had to work 2 or 3 days with just patience, never griped about nothing. And, you know, I catch myself doing some things like that today. Just for the fun of it, you don't have to. And so out there, you know, I have quite a collection of woodworking tools. And I don't use many of them because I've got electric ones, you know, that you plug in and use, but I've collected them. I got an old toolbox at home that's about 4 feet high and 3 feet wide and a foot deep, and it's all made out of yellow pine foot boards. And it was on the garage out there in the farm when we lived out there. And after they died, why, that was sitting on my drive one day when I come home. So one of the boys, which I was raised with, you know, like brothers, there was 3 of us, and they are just cousins, but anyway, we were raised like brothers. There's that toolbox set, and it was Uncle Jim's. So we sat in the garage for a while, and I took it down to the car wash and washed it all up, and that old yellow pine really looked good after 2 or 3 weeks sitting there drying. My wife said, "Oh, Jack, where'd that box come from? My dolls didn't really fit in that good." I had visions of putting tools in it. But, you know, that's just the way things happen. And we've got old boxes and stuff I fixed up in our house and things like that. So I do the same thing at home that I do out to the museum.
That kind of takes us back to where we started here, talking about your Uncle Jim. Is there any relationship between places like the Flywheels and Yesteryear Museum and obviously the past, but what's happening today in society?
Oh, I think so. You know, I might have to stop and think just where they do, but it's not the same, you know. I think about how hard it was to raise our children. When you got one wastebasket to empty and 4 boys, that's kind of hard to keep them busy. Back when I was young, you know, the chickens needed fed and watered, and the cows needed milked, and dogs, and it was supper time and time to go to bed. And so it's different. It's a lot different. But we still have great kids, and they do good today. I see great things happening, you know, and our grandchildren, they're playing ball and stuff more than we did. But you still had old country teams up and down 18 Highway that had good ball games and stuff. So a lot of things are the same. You go to Dairy Queen now and get a cone. So back then they made a freezer of ice cream out on the farm. And it didn't happen every day, you know. That was a treat every once or 2 weeks. But you were, I don't know if you were expected to do more what. You know, I was sitting in ag class one time and the principal opened the door and called me out. And I was scared to death. I wondered what I did. And he said, "Jack, I've been watching you." And he said, "So-and-so up at Upland wants to stay home and shuck corn. Will you drive that bus?" That's a 45-passenger school bus. That's 16 years old. And he said, I started opening up my mouth to say something, and he said, "And I've got your room and board set up there. You can stay at his house." And his mother said she'd take care of things. And so I said, "But I don't have a chauffeur's license." He said, "I'll take care of that." So here I am, one of them badges that you wear on your cap, you know. I thought you had to be somebody special to have one of them when I was a kid. And so they put you in positions that the kids don't get put into today. And that's kind of bad. But they do get put in positions in school and what have you, and church. And so I can't say that it's altogether different than what. It's just different chores now.
So you were put in a position of being special.
Absolutely.
What one thought would you want to leave our viewers as a concluding remark here with this discussion?
Well, I don't know. As far as the museum goes, I hope it keeps going, and I hope somebody steps forward and that's interested in it like I am. I hope I don't have to quit yet, but I got to slow down a little. I think that, you know, hopefully that you treat your family great and you get along with them as well as we do. Our family has been through quite a bit. You know, I was a widow, and my wife was a widow, and I was a widower when met and got married and put two families together. It started out with 5 teenagers and a 5-year-old or 7-year-old. But and we had some rough times, but we had some good times. And that was 36 years ago that we put them together, but we're still friendly and still treat all of them like they're our own. So teach them the right way and set a good example for them. I back then I did a lot of work in Scouts and had them all involved in Scouts and the girls too. And so it was a good organization to bring them up and set good examples. My wife, she was a teacher, so that helped.
Thank you.
Welcome.